The Chicago Bears fall to the San Francisco 49ers 33-22, going to 3-5 on the season. And it was a scary day in the lakefront. Welcome back here to the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 AM, where facts matter. I am Mike Mercado, joined with the one and only, the marvelous Dan Marver. Paul Shivari and Devin Tingle will join us in a little while. And it was a very interesting day full of goblins and ghouls over in the one and only Soldier Field. And Marver, there was a lot of tricks and a lot of treats, but what did you take away initially from what was a hectic week in this organization and what was Chris Tabor's first game as a head coach for our Chicago Bears?
I mean, Chris Tabor looked like a real coach out there. I mean, he was giving enthusiastic greetings, and it started out pretty well. I mean, the first half, the Bears looked pretty good, and I had a house full of people watching it, and the consensus was that the Bears had to win this game to have a chance to make the playoffs. So that speaks for itself. But Justin Fields is growing. I mean, he did get that one touchdown where he finally wasn't tripped up by the ankles, like he often is. And, unfortunately, the defense wasn't able to respond. They gave up 33 points, for God's sake. So, and then, of course, they now had another injury for a while. Herbert was out, and so they had to put Nall in. So, all in all, considering their personnel issues, Khalil Mack didn't play. So, I don't know. It looks like it's going to be a non-playoff season to me, but what do you think?
You know what? It's funny you say that, Marvelous One, because while I might be looking for some courage as the Cowardly Lion, I think we can find really positives and, of course, negatives from this game because you did lose and every game matters. And I think one of the positives you saw were the explosive moments from Justin Fields. You and I have been talking about it every time we do a post-game show, how whether they're going to win or they're going to lose, we want to see the maturation of Justin Fields. I think in today's game, with all the circumstances that we've seen with the coaching staff and even on the roster, the fact that Justin Fields goes 19 for 27, 175 yards, a touchdown, does have an interception, but again, it's something we've seen all season where it was on the receiver's fingertips and ends up being a tip ball. He then has 10 carries for 103 yards and a touchdown rushing. We got to give a quick shout out to Jimmy Garoppolo, who really put it on, 322 passing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. But I think we stay on the positive right now. We're staying on the good candy, if you will, about this Bears game, because I think seeing some of the plays, seeing that Justin Fields, isn't it a novel ideal, Marvel, that we've been talking about this forever, that, what we want to see is, play action, bootlegs, QB runs, passes to the tight end. And they did all that. And look how good was Justin Fields.
Yeah. I mean, Jesse James got a touchdown. So, I mean, that was unusual right there. So I think that it looks like, I mean, their offense was clicking for a while there, and it looked like, except it was the kicking game wasn't that great either. Each team did have some issues, but there was a clear extra point miss that didn't turn out to be the difference, but it could have been. And they just didn't seem in sync really in the second half at all. I mean, the Fields could have easily been sacked on the touchdown. I don't know if it's the play calling or just the the talent or lack thereof, but it just doesn't seem like they have all cylinders going in the second half.
And it's something we've been seeing with Allen Robinson, right? Where it just doesn't seem like they've been connecting. But what we have seen is Justin Fields does have good chemistry with the guys that he was on the practice squad with and that he was the second and third team with. So again, it goes back to what were we doing in the beginning of the season with the Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, Justin Fields fiasco. But now that we're here, we're starting to see it go week to week. And I think what's a big shame is while you do understand in a season like this, right, that it's more about the growth of Justin Fields and you would like to get the win, it does, kind of put a sour taste because you did feel like you wasted a wonderful Justin Fields game. You were able to put points on the board. And one of these negatives that I kind of want to go to is this defense. While again, there were moments in the season throughout games, and we know it's going to go up and down, and there are injuries on this defense, but all the money on this team is on this defense, except for, of course, the quarterbacks and the tight ends that they paid on offense. But everything's on defense. This Bears defense had no takeaways, no sacks, did not force a punt, and allowed over 470 yards on offense. Like, that's unacceptable when you have a game like this. The whole point of paying your defense, to having these stars, to be able to put yourself in that position, is when your young rookie quarterback plays like that, to be able to bail him out, to help him out, and they didn't do that.
It's discouraging from the standpoint that now in November, other than the Thanksgiving game in Detroit, they have some tough games in Pittsburgh and against Baltimore. So, I mean, I would concur that it looks unlikely that they would get to an 8-9 or 9-8 record, which would be required to make the playoffs, which is always the goal. And it was a different feel, honestly, without Coach Nagy there. I mean, honestly, it seemed like in the first half there was a lot more enthusiasm in the sidelines than I'd seen, and it was reflected in their play. But the defense just couldn't stop San Francisco for some reason, and this is with obviously our local Garoppolo from Arlington Heights, Rolling Meadows High School, was able to pile up all those numbers, and he's not even the chosen one there. The rookie Lance is their number one guy, so it's very disappointing.
And it's, again, when you're seeing that Jimmy Garoppolo is having a career game again. He's 2-0 now against his hometown team, but Eli Mitchell with 18 carries, 137 yards, and a touchdown. He averaged almost 8 yards a carry. That's unacceptable. Again, I understand we have to be fair.
Yeah, it is discouraging. The defense had been carrying them, and whoops.
No, 100%. Yeah, and it hurts. This, as you were saying, it hurts and it discourages you because you feel like they can win these games.
Yeah. As we were saying, it doesn't look like. I mean, I want to really think about now that get close to the fact that they need to. We're going to be soon saying what do we need in 2022. We're not that far away from getting to the point where what do we need to do in 2022? Do we need a new coach? Do we need a better offensive line, which is always a story? What do we need? Because again, I mean, I'm looking at November, and then they haven't even played Minnesota yet. So, I mean, right now 3-5 looks like maybe 5-12 or something, or 6-11, which is unacceptable too.
And of course, you're not going to get any draft picks because of all the moves that they made during this past draft to get a Justin Fields. But I also think that the conversation is now turning into something really interesting, right?
Here we're gonna go.
Yeah, nice. There we go. Hey, and the marvelous one with the costume. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Yes.
Some of the only good stuff we're getting from this Bears loss to the San Francisco 49ers. A game I think a lot of us thought the Bears can actually sneak a win, and it was a game that both teams needed. And I think, Marver, let me ask you this. The rest of the year is going to be talking about what's going to happen with Justin Fields and his growth and the evolution of him as a young quarterback in this league. But I think now that we're going to get to week 9 and we understand this team is not going to make the playoffs, they don't have a good enough team or the depth to do it. The conversations are not going to be about the coach in the future, the GM of the future. And I wonder, in your opinion, what have you learned halfway through this season? What is it that you think that you know for sure about the future of this organization? Is it that they're going to have to move on from the front office and the coaching staff? Are you comfortable with Justin Fields being the quarterback for this franchise moving forward? Do you feel like you know something? Khalil Herbert, maybe the diamond in the rough. Where are you when it comes to halfway through the season? You know for sure about this Bears team.
Yeah, well, they've had a running game. I mean, no matter who it was, Montgomery or Herbert or whoever, or even Williams. And the thing, whatever happened to Tariq Cohen? I mean, they had a lot of good running games. Even this one wasn't that bad. The running attack was okay. I mean, so and it looks like the favorite target is Mooney for Fields. I mean, I think he's developing. I mean, he hasn't really connected with Robinson that much, surprisingly, and the pass game has been erratic at best. But the running game seems to be coming along. I mean, it's just, I think Fields, you're obviously going to be tied to him for the future. I mean, there's no two ways about it at this point. And as I predicted, he through unusual circumstances, he did start against Cleveland, was his first start. And so he's going to be the quarterback the rest of the way, come heck or high water. So there's no doubt about that. It's just that they need to surround him with maybe some better talent, better line, maybe some, I don't know if they need more receivers or need somebody he's more comfortable with. And the running game is fine. I mean, honestly, and the defense has carried the way. It was just a little bit off today.
You know, one thing that I keep looking at when I see this team and the roster moves that were made, it seemed like they wanted to get really fast, right, at wide receiver. Do you ever see the wide receivers getting open? Do you ever see Justin Fields able to just be able to get a ball to someone cleanly and easily? Everything always seems to be so well covered. And to me, again, it just goes back to the missteps of this entire front office with the moves that they made, and whether it was getting a right tackle that they want to move to left tackle that has bad back to Goodwin.
Exactly.
And I don't know if at this point they can save their jobs. You know, I don't know where they're at when it comes to the future of this organization, because as you and I were saying this entire time here on the Sports Cubicle, I'm Mike Mercado with the one and only, the marvelous one, Dan Marver. Paul Shivari and Devin Teagle will be joining us in just a little while. We are covering the Chicago Bears as they fall to 3-5, as they lose to the San Francisco 49ers 33-22, Halloween Day at the lakefront at Soldier Field. Marvelous one. I think the interesting thing moving forward for this team, though, as we kind of look at the long term for this team, is how patient is the fan base going to be with the way they handle this quarterback?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously this was the chosen one for the Bears. There was no question about that. So I think there's going to be a certain amount of patience, maybe, you know, much more so than with Trubisky, actually, in my opinion. And I think that they're going to say, the fans are going to say, well, you know, we're going to stick with them. And then this year they didn't quite make the playoffs, and look forward to, you know, years. I mean, the thing is, it's weird. You look at Kansas City; they're not doing so well this year. They look like they're unstoppable with Mahomes. He had, you know, his first year was, you know, not as great as the subsequent years. Not to compare the two quarterbacks, but rookies sometimes in the NFL, it's very hard for them. You look at all the other rookie quarterbacks. I mean, they're having their struggles, all of them. So, you know, Fields isn't alone in that regard. So it's a tough league to break into, I'm told, you know, by the experts. So he's doing pretty well. I mean, I would like to see more creativity in offense, honestly. I mean, that one play where he did go for the touchdown, it was completely improvised, but I like to see some more planned plays like that, you know, where they do pass action, you know, or some kind of thing. You know, obviously there was a couple plays where it was the camera thought the Null had the ball and it was actually Fields. So if you can do that deception and the defense goes for the fake, you can get some openings, obviously.
And I think that kind of goes into my next point, where last week on the Sports Cubicle, all four of us were able to talk about the Bears. And one thing that Paul Shivari brought up was, if growth is linear, he hasn't seen it within Justin Fields. And I feel like this was a objective, subjective. I think it was a unanimous. We saw a step forward for Justin Fields today. The Bears didn't win this game. That's going to happen, especially when you don't have that great of a team against a team that's pretty okay. A lot of people thought is going to be a dangerous team with the roster they had. You talk about injuries devastating the team. I think, and I don't know if you feel the same, I'll throw it to you in a second, but I think today was one of the first times where, unbiased, just watching a young quarterback in this league and seeing how this entire league is being played right now, I do think this was the step forward for Justin Fields. He could struggle next week on Monday Night Football in front of the nation against Pittsburgh. We can see that. But I think today was a step forward for the young man.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a progress as long as it's linear and upward. That's the key. I mean, it's hard to judge when you're looking mostly at wins and losses. And if the losses pile up, it doesn't look like there's been much progress, you know. So as an individual, I think that he is the future of the Bears at quarterback. There's no two ways about it. They're not going to give up on him, you know, as it was for Trubisky. It took 3 or 4 years to give up on him. So I think that there's going to be a real long, you know, wait period before they would make any changes now. I mean, they're committed to Fields, clearly.
So moving a little forward, looking to the future, the one and only, the sheriff, the cowboy, the marvelous one, Dan Marver. I'm Mike Mercado here on the Sports Cubicle. The Chicago Bears fall to the San Francisco 49ers. Paul Shivari and Devin Teagle will join us in just a little while. We look a little forward. What do you think about Monday Night Football? Do you feel like we're going to see the same type of game plan we saw today at the lakefront? Do you feel with Matt Nagy probably coming back from COVID that things will go back to how they were back? Where are you with the next week and it being such a high profile game against a team that, well, on paper they may seem better, I think they can be got into if you play a good game?
Well, here's my thinking at it. They have not done that well in the last few weeks against veteran potential Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And they will be facing another one who's in the twilight, Ben Roethlisberger. But for whatever reason, he seems to hang in there. He knows what he's doing. I mean, he's the kind of guy that seems to be able to get out of trouble in the backfield and find his receivers year in and year out. And so with that in mind, it would seem like a bad recipe for the Bears because they did so poorly against Rodgers and Brady. So here's another one, maybe not as great as those two I mentioned, but he certainly has the creds. He's been in the league for, he's outlasted people who were drafted with him, like Manning, it was drafted in the same class. I mean, Eli, and then also the guy that was with the Rivers. They were in the same draft class, so he's still standing, and they're gone.
And I guess that's why you got to have you have to make sure that you take care of business. You don't let them do what they did to Cleveland. If you have a team like San Francisco or Pittsburgh on the ropes, you got to be able to beat them. And this is something that we're going to have to see. It's a great point, Marvelous One, where if we're going to see the maturation and see Justin Fields hit that type of trajectory, you got to win those games. We saw it with the Bulls against Utah. You got to win certain games. Certain teams, certain good teams beat and win games where it seems like they're not able to, and the bad teams lose those. And I think for the Bears, that's the next process. But it's a little hard to judge when you don't or you're not certain of what the front office and the coaching staff is going to be moving forward. But all of you know, we'll be here to keep you up to date if anything changes with that. Marvelous One, as we get ready to hit the scoreboards, any final thoughts of this Bears loss to San Francisco and kind of moving forward into the next half of the season?
I actually was a little bit concerned about the kicking game. Santos has been so reliable, and this wasn't actually a cold and windy day. I expect it will be kind of a cold and windy day Monday night in Pennsylvania, and going forward here in Chicago. Obviously in Detroit they won't have that issue on Thanksgiving Day in a dome, but it seems like they just don't have what it takes to get it all together. You look at these other teams. Obviously, the quarterbacks seem to have more. If you count the time of the protection, the other quarterbacks in the league seem to have more time to make their decisions. And here we have a rookie that's being forced to make quick decisions, and he's not being used well enough, as in my opinion, with his feet, to really take advantage of all his skill set.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see how this all breaks down and what happens with Chris Tabor. But with that, we got to hit the scoreboard. Yeah. Paul Shivari will let us know every single outcome in the NFL. Marvelous One, Dan Marver, the Sheriff. I'm Mike Mercado. You've been listening to the Sports Cubicle. Let's hit the scoreboard with Paul.